In the past 40 years, there have been reports of over 2,500 children who claim to have memories of another life. At the University of Virginia, a department has been set up to investigate these stories. Psychiatrist Dr. Jim Tucker is the director of research.
So this is a worldwide phenomenon. It takes place in places and families with a belief in reincarnation and places and families without a belief in reincarnation. And in a number of the cases, the child's statements have been verified to be accurate.
Many of these cases show a pattern of consistent and detailed information.
The children will usually start talking about these memories at a very early age, usually 2 or 3. Some of them talk about them matter-of-factly, but other children use great emotion in describing these things and will often long for the previous family.
Jim records the child's memories and investigates whether there might be a connection to an actual person who has lived before. Many of the cases seem to defy simple, rational explanation. One of Dr. Tucker's most celebrated cases was a boy he investigated from the Midwest of America.
This is a very interesting case of a boy who had memories of being his grandfather. And he said that God gives you a card to come back, and I guess this is a drawing of the card that he did.
Gus Taylor is the child who drew that card. Since he was a toddler, he has believed that in a past life, he was his own grandfather. Gus is now 10 years old.
When he was about 1.5, I was changing his diaper on his changing table, and he all of a sudden just looked at me and said, "You know, when I was your age, I used to change your diaper." And I went, whoa, this is weird.
Gus was named for his grandfather, and his full name is August. His grandfather had died the year before he was born, so he really didn't, he never got to know his grandfather. But he would insist that he was Grandpa Augie. If we were referring to Grandpa Augie, he would just say, "You mean me?" You know, he was just very adamant, like, we should know that he is Grandpa Augie.
Where's me?
There. There.
Where's me again? See if you can find me somewhere else.
Gus was 4 when Ron was given an old family album. To his parents' astonishment, Gus was able to point out his grandfather in an old school photograph. He also correctly identified this as the first car that his grandfather ever owned.
He showed me a picture, and then I said, that was my first car. And then my dad was like, that's weird, because the car was Grandpa Augie's first car. So it was all scary.
Kathy and Ron were intrigued by their son's ability to identify his grandfather in photos. But one day, Gus told them something that turned their intrigue to shock.
Gus and I were chatting, and he started saying something about Grandpa Augie, which wasn't unusual. And I said to him, when you were Grandpa Augie, did you have any sisters or brothers? He said, well, I had a sister, but she died. And so that sort of caught my attention because, you know, we haven't had any deaths in the family. And he said, well, she died. And I just sort of looked at him and he said, yeah, she turned to a fish. She died, some bad guys.
I just was flabbergasted. I really was just I was speechless because I just couldn't understand how he would know anything about that.
Apparently what happened was his aunt was murdered and her body was dumped into the San Francisco Bay.
There was no way he could know anything about her circumstances and how she died because it was never discussed and was barely discussed with me, with him in my family. To hear my son, who didn't know my father, didn't know his aunt who was murdered, speak about this, and because that's when I just went, there's something going on here that I just don't understand.
For many in the West, reincarnation is an alien idea. Chris French believes that it's simply a comforting illusion, which helps some people avoid the difficult realities of death.
On the one hand, you've got science that says, once you die, that's it, that's the end, nothing else. On the other hand, you've got a belief system that says you will survive, you will be reunited with your loved ones. In a sense, you do go on forever. You know, how much more appealing can you get? I mean, we all want that, we'd all want to believe that.
For Kathy Taylor, her son Gus's belief that he was his own grandfather reborn went totally against her own religious upbringing.
I grew up a Southern Baptist. My father's a Southern Baptist minister, and Southern Baptists certainly don't, teach anything about reincarnation. So that was not, that was furthest from my mind when Gus started saying these things. This one day he sort of popped up and looked at me and said, "You know, Mom, when we die, we get to come back." And he looked at me again and he said, "I used to be big and now I'm a kid again." And he was just very excited about this. He said that God gave him a ticket. And, he also referred to a porthole, and that he came through a porthole, and that he used to be big and all of a sudden he's through this porthole and then he's a kid again.